clear text day was surprisingly warm for early October. The sun was warm, and a light breeze barely ruffled the yellowed leaves on the birch trees. Tamara stood at the window of her city apartment, absent-mindedly stirring the cooled tea. She loved such quiet mornings, when you could just stand there, watching the city wake up and think about something of your own. Lately, her thoughts had been returning to her mother more and more often. They hadn't seen each other in over a month. Working in the city library took up a lot of time, and there were enough household chores. The phone conversations were getting shorter and shorter. "How are you, Mom? Are you all right?" "Well, I'll run." And every time, after such conversations, it became uneasy. Tamara put the cup down and began to gather some presents for her mother. She took warm cabbage pies out of the oven. Her mother always said that her daughter made them almost as tasty as she did. She put in the basket a jar of raspberry jam, made in the summer, and the berries in the garden were big and sweet. "I added some ruddy apples from the same garden. My husband brought a whole box last week." "Andre," Tamara sighed, remembering their morning conversation. "Going to the district center on business," he said, hurriedly finishing his coffee. "I'll be back late, don't wait up." She wanted to offer to go with him. It was on the way, we could visit her mother together, but he had already grabbed his briefcase and, kissing her on the cheek, ran out the door. He was often in such a hurry lately, as if he were avoiding longer conversations. Tamara carefully placed the gifts in the wicker basket her father had woven years ago. She stood for a moment, stroking the time-darkened twigs. It was 10 years since he had been gone, and she still sometimes forgot about it, and when she came to visit her mother, she looked for his figure in the garden. And now, as if in reality, she saw him sitting on an old bench under an apple tree, leisurely weaving twigs, and next to his mother hanging laundry, and they were talking softly about something. The marshrutka rolled leisurely along the broken road, bouncing on the bumps. Outside the window the familiar landscape was floating by. Yellow birch groves were replaced by reddish aspen groves. There were dark islands of spruce forests, abandoned fields overgrown with tall grass. Tamara leaned her forehead against the cool glass, looking at the places familiar from her childhood. Every turn of the road, every tree here held its own stories. Here showed the turn to the old mill. There he and the village kids liked to swim in the summer. The mill wheel had long ago rotted away, but the pool beneath it remained as deep and mysterious. A little farther away, he could see the abandoned apple orchard of the former collective farm, once well-maintained, now feral, but still bearing fruit. She and her girlfriends used to run there for Antonovka, the most delicious apples in the world. It was quiet in the cabin of the minibus, only the radio hummed softly, and the passengers occasionally chatted. An elderly woman, in a colorful scarf, was dozing, clutching a shopping bag to her chest. A young mother was rocking a cranky baby. Tamara suddenly caught herself thinking that all these people were also carrying their stories, their joys and sorrows. The driver announced her stop, and Tamara, having thanked, got out on the country road. It took about 15 minutes to walk to her mother's house. She loved this part of the journey. The silence, interrupted only by the rustling of leaves and the rare cawing of crows, helped her to tune into the unhurried countryside. Here time seemed to slow down, allowing her to notice things that usually escape attention, like spider webs glistening in the sunlight, like bunches of rowan trees turning red, like fallen leaves rustling underfoot. The path led her to a familiar street. Her parents' house stood third from the edge, old but sturdy, with newly painted blue shutters. Paint every year, saying it should look as tidy as it had in her father's time. The poly garden mottled with the last of the fall flowers. Dahlias were blazing, asters were in full bloom, velvets were burning brightly. As she approached the gate, Tamara slowed her step. Something was wrong. There was a car parked outside the house, a dark blue Ford, just like Andre's. She blinked, trying to banish driving. No, it was definitely his car. She recognized the license plate number and even the small dent on the rear fender from an unfortunate parking spot outside the supermarket. Something clenched unpleasantly in her chest. Tamara felt her hands trembling treacherously and clenched the handle of the wicker basket tighter. What was Andre doing here when he should be in the district center? Why didn't he say he was going to his mother-in-law? And why hadn't his mother mentioned it on the phone when they had talked last night? Questions swarmed in her mind, but none of them had an answer. She gently pushed the gate open, careful not to squeak the hinges. The old iron shrieked treacherously anyway, and the sound was deafening in the silence of the fall day. The yard was empty. Only the chickens were leisurely raking the dried earth under the old apple tree. The laundry, sheets and pillowcases, as white as the first snow, swayed lazily on the rope. Mother was always proud of the way she was able to wash laundry. She did not recognize modern powders, used only laundry soap and ashes. Muffled voices came from the open kitchen window. Tamara stopped halfway to the porch, listening. Her heart was pounding so hard that it sounded like it should be audible throughout the neighborhood. She recognized her mother's voice. Her mother's voice was unaccustomedly high, raspy, not at all like her usual calm tone. And Andre's voice was quiet, as if apologizing. The porch floorboards creaked treacherously under her feet. Tamara squeezed her eyes shut for a moment, gathering her strength. Maybe this was all some kind of misunderstanding. Maybe Andre really had business in the district center, and then he just decided to visit his mother-in-law. But why didn't he warn her? And why could the mother's voice sound so desperate? The front door was unlocked. In the village, they rarely locked the door during the day. The hallway smelled of freshly baked bread and of the herbs my mother had hung from the ceiling. Mint, oregano, St. John's wort. For some reason this familiar odor seemed foreign and out of place, as if she had entered a house that only pretended to be her own. Tamara took another step and froze when she heard her mother's words coming from the kitchen. "How is it, Andriusha? How will we tell Tamara all this now? She will not. She won't survive it." Her voice broke into a sob, a muffled, strangled sob, as if her mother were clamping her hand over her mouth, trying to hold back her tears. "Valentina Petrovna." Andre's voice sounded muffled. "We agreed. We can't keep silent any longer. How long can you carry this inside you? It's been 25 years. There was a strange mixture of determination and despair in his words, as if he had been preparing for this conversation for a long time, but now that the moment had come, he was afraid of what he was going to say. The basket slipped from Tamara's weakened fingers and fell to the floor with a thud. The apples rolled off the painted floorboards and the bottom rolled to the kitchen threshold. In the silence that ensued, the clock on the wall could be heard counting down the seconds, measuredly, indifferently, as if nothing was happening. "Jesus," whispered her mother, and there was such horror in her voice that Tamara felt a chill inside. "Tamaroshka, daughter." The last word sounded strange, as if her mother doubted whether she had the right to call her that. Tamara stood in the doorway, unable to take a step. Andre rose from the table, pale, with drops of sweat on his forehead, so unlike his usual confident and calm self. The mother sat, clutching her white fingers to the edge of the table, and looked at her daughter as if she saw a ghost. There was some paper on the table, old and yellowed from time. Out of the corner of her eye Tamara noticed a stamp and a signature at the bottom of the page. Something official, some kind of document. She couldn't make out what it was, and she didn't want to. Probably. There was a strange numbness growing inside, as if this wasn't happening to her, but to someone else, and she was just a bystander watching someone else's drama. "Sit down, daughter." Her mother said the words so softly that they were barely audible. Her hands, usually so confident and strong, were now helplessly rubbing the edge of the old oilcloth. Tamara remembered this oilcloth, blue, with a faded pattern of cornflowers. It had been on the kitchen table since her father's time, and her mother had never wanted to change it, though Tamara had suggested buying a new one many times. Andre stood up, giving way to her, but Tamara remained standing in the doorway. Her feet felt like they were stuck to the floor, and her head was as nosy as if she had drunk strong wine. A ray of sunlight through the curtain fell on the table, highlighting the dust in the air and the very document, a yellowed piece of paper that seemed to radiate some sinister power. "How about some tea?" her mother suddenly suggested, and it was so ridiculous for the situation that Tamara almost laughed. Hysterical. Scary, but the laughter got stuck somewhere in her throat, turning into a strange squeeze sound. "Valentina Petrovna," Andre said quietly, "let's get on with it. Now that we've started." He ran his hand over his face as if wiping away an invisible cobweb. Tamara had never seen her husband like this, confused, aged, with some guilty crease near his mouth. Her mother suddenly sobbed and covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook, and this silent crying was more terrible than any sobs. Tamara felt her throat tighten with nausea. What could have driven her mother, always so reserved, to such a state? "Mom." Tamara's own voice seemed foreign to her. "What's going on? What's that paper? Why is Andre here?" The questions burst out on their own, one after another, as if a dam had burst. It was stuffy in the kitchen, despite the open window. Somewhere outside, a dog was barking loudly, and this mundane sound seemed so out of place now, almost sacrilegious. On the windowsill were pots of geraniums, red and pink, her mother's favorite flowers. Tamara remembered as a child trying to tear off the brightly colored petals, and her mother explaining to her that flowers were alive, and they hurt too. 25 years ago, her mother began, and her voice sounded as if every word caused her physical pain. In our hospital, something happened. Happened. She sobbed again and fell silent, looking helplessly at Andre. At the maternity hospital, he said firmly, though the jaundices in his cheekbones were running erratically. There was a mix-up at the maternity hospital with the babies, double-born. They got mixed up. Tamara felt the room begin to spin before her eyes. She grasped the door jamb machinatically to keep from falling. What are you talking about? Her voice trailed off into a scream. What confusion! What does this have to do with Tamaroshka? Her mother held out her hands to her, but immediately dropped them helplessly on the table. I'm sorry, we found out about it by accident, just recently. Andre. He was working with the hospital archives on some case and came across some old documents. I couldn't keep quiet, Andre said in a muffled voice. This is too serious. We're talking about two families. Tamara felt the ground go from under her feet. Somewhere on the edge of her consciousness flashed the absurd thought of picking up the scattered apples, as they would get dirty on the floor. It was simply impossible to think of anything else. So, the words clawed at her throat. So I'm not your daughter. Not your daughter, Mom. The last word sounded like a question, and that made it even scarier. Her mother lunged at her with such force that the chair thudded back against the wall. You're my daughter, she screamed. Mine. I carried you under my heart. I gave birth to you. But there had been a mix-up at the birth center. Tamara felt hysterical laughter coming to her throat. They mixed up the tags, or the diapers, or whatever. And you raised someone else's baby. And somewhere there's another woman who raised your real daughter. Tamara, listen. Andre took a step toward her, but she recoiled as if from a blow. We should have told you. It's every man's right to know the truth about his origins. And Valentina Petrovna agreed. Agreed. Tamara felt a wave of anger rising inside. You were discussing it behind my back, planning how best to present the news. No one asked for my consent. No one considered my right not to know the damn truth. Suddenly Tamara felt she could no longer be in this kitchen, here, where her entire childhood had passed, where she had helped her mother make dumplings, where her father had taught her to solve math problems, where they had drank tea with raspberry jam on winter evenings. Now it all seemed alien, fake, like a set in some ridiculous play. She turned and rushed for the exit, almost falling on the porch. The yard was still as quiet and still. The chickens were still digging under the apple tree. The laundry still swayed lazily on the road. The sun still shone through the yellowing leaves. The world around her hadn't changed, though inside Tamara's mind turned upside down. Tamara, daughter. Her mother's voice caught up with her at the gate. That daughter cut her heart sharper than a knife. Did she have the right to call her that now? Had she ever had? Stay away. Tamara put her hand out in front of her as if in defense. She didn't recognize her own voice, hoarse, raspy. Don't. Just give me time. Andre appeared on the porch, following his mother. His face was gray with tension. Let me take you home, he offered quietly. Tamara laughed hysterically. Home? Where's my home now? Where's my real family? Who am I anyway? Her mother shrieked and leaned against the wicket post. She looked so small and helpless in her old chintz robe with her gray braid disheveled. Tamara had always wondered how early her mother sat up, before she was 40. Now she thought maybe it was just then, 25 years ago, when she learned she was raising someone else's child. You're our daughter, her mother said firmly, though tears ran down her cheeks. It doesn't matter what those papers say. I carried you under my heart. No. Tamara almost screamed. You carried another girl. You gave birth to another one. And me. I was born to some strange woman who maybe pines for her child all her life. Did you think of her? About that other mother? Andre took a step forward. We can find them. The paperwork has all the details. If you want to. If I want. Tamara felt nausea coming up to her throat. What if I don't want to? If I want things to go back to the way they were? Why did you decide for me? Why didn't you leave things the way they were? She looked around as if she were seeing this yard for the first time. The old apple tree she'd played under as a child. The bench where she and her father liked to sit in the evenings, looking at the stars. The lilac bush by the fence that her father had planted the year she was born. The year she was born? Or the year that other girl was born? I couldn't keep quiet any longer, the mother said quietly. When Andre showed me the documents, it was like reliving that nightmare a second time. I remember the first time they brought you in, so small, with black fuzz on your head. And then the nurse took you away for feeding and brought another baby. We didn't suspect a thing. All newborns are so similar. Tamara listened and every word hurt somewhere deep inside. She imagined the young mother, her real mother, who had also held someone else's baby, unaware of the mistake, who might have wondered why the tunic-haired daughter suddenly had blonde curls, just like the neighbor girl. And father? Tamara asked suddenly. Did he know? The mother shook her head. I don't know. No. We only found out now, when Andre. So he died thinking I was his own daughter. Tamara felt tears roll down her cheeks. She remembered how her father was proud of her successes at school, how happy he was when she entered the institute, how he told all the neighbors that his Tamaroshko was the smartest and most beautiful. Maybe it's for the best that he didn't find out. Andre stood silently, shifting his gaze from his wife to his mother-in-law, his hands, usually so confident, now hung helplessly along his body. He was a lawyer, used to dealing with documents, facts, evidence, but right now, no amount of professional skill could help him deal with this situation. You know, her mother said suddenly, taking a step toward Tamara, when you were little, you were afraid of thunderstorms. And I was the only one who could calm you down. I'd hold you close, stroke your head, and sing you a lullaby, the same one my mother used to sing to me, and you would fall asleep in my arms. So warm, so dear. The memory of the lullaby broke something in Tamara. She sank down on the grass near the gate, wrapping her arms around her knees. Dry stalks tickled her palms, a grasshopper chirped somewhere nearby, and these simple sensations suddenly seemed like a life-saving straw to cling to in order not to drown in the despair that overwhelmed her. I remember that lullaby, she whispered, about the gray cat that comes to stay the night. You sang it every time there was thunder, and also when I was sick, and the night I broke my knee falling off my bike. Her mother slowly lowered herself to the grass beside her, not caring that she was dirtying her robe. Her wrinkled hand hesitantly touched Tamara's shoulder, and she flinched but didn't pull away. From this simple touch, so familiar from her childhood, something trembled and ached inside. And remember, Mother's voice sounded quiet, almost a whisper. How did you get scarlet fever in first grade? A fever of 40, you're burning up, delirious. I didn't leave your bed for 3 nights, changing compresses, drinking raspberry tea. The doctor said that you should go to the hospital, but I couldn't let you go. I was afraid that they would look at you wrong. Andre stood a little ways away, leaning against the fence. His face was tense, as if he was fighting the urge to say or do something, but realized that it was better to keep silent now. The sun was already slipping towards sunset, coloring the sky a soft pink, and the long shadows from the trees lay in a fanciful pattern on the ground. You know what the worst part is? Tamara said suddenly, looking somewhere in the distance. I don't. I was always proud to look like Daddy. Everyone said the same face, especially the eyes and the smile. And now it turns out it's just a coincidence that everything I believed was a lie. Not everything. Her mother squeezed her shoulder tighter. Love isn't a lie. The way your father and I loved you, the way we cared for you, the way we rejoiced at your successes and were saddened by your failures, it's all real. Is it possible to lie in love? Tamara turned to her, tears glistening in her eyes. And that one is another woman. She loved my birth mom too. That girl you gave birth to. How did she cope all these years? Andre finally dared to raise his voice. If you want, we can find them. The documents have all the details. Last name, address at the time of birth. We can try. No. Tamara stood up abruptly, shaking off her skirt. I mean, I don't know. Not right now. I don't. I have to first realize who I am now. How do I live with that knowledge? How do I look in the mirror and not look for someone else's features in my face? Mother, too, rose with a lurch and holding her lower back. There was so much familiarity in this simple movement that Tamara's heart snapped again. How many times had she seen her mother get up from the garden, rubbing her tired back? How many times had she suggested she see a doctor, get a massage? And does it matter now whose blood flows in their veins? Daughter, her mother said the word with some special tenderness, as if tasting it. You may be angry with me, You may not forgive me for agreeing to tell you the truth, but know that nothing has changed for me. You are my daughter, the same little girl I carried in my arms, the one I braided pigtails for, the one I mended the tights torn at the knees. And everything has changed for me," Tamara replied quietly, as if someone erased the old picture and tainted a new one, seemingly similar, but with different colors, with a different meaning. "And I don't know how to look at this picture now, how to understand what is real in it, and what only seems so." A heavy silence hung in the air, broken only by the distant mooing of cows returning from the pasture, and by the crackling of restless grasshoppers. The setting sun painted the tops of the trees a golden color, and this peaceful landscape seemed almost mocking against the storm that raged in the souls of the three men frozen at the old village gate. "Let's go inside," said the mother, unexpectedly firmly. "It's getting evening, the mosquitoes will be here soon, and the tea is quite cold." She said it in such a casual tone, as if nothing had happened, as if they had just lingered in the yard talking, as had happened so many times before. Tamara wanted to object, to say that she couldn't go back to this house, where everything was suddenly foreign, where every picture on the wall now seemed false, but something in her mother's voice, perhaps an attempt to hold on to her familiar way of life in the face of a collapsing world, made her keep silent. Andre opened the wicket, letting them go through. His movements were mechanical, as if he, too, was trying to hide for a long time, behind ordinary actions, from the storm that raged inside. It was the first time Tamara had seen him so lost, so unsure, in their entire marriage. Everything in the house was still the same, the clock on the wall was still running, the smell of freshly baked bread and herbs, the unfortunate documents still lying on the table. Only now Tamara noticed that in addition to it, on the table were spread some old photographs. "These are from the maternity hospital," her mother said quietly, intercepting her gaze. "There's you. That is my own daughter, just after she was born. And here you are the one they brought me later." Her voice trembled, but she managed herself and continued. "I was going over them all last night, after Andre showed me the documents, trying to find some sign, some hint. How did I not notice then?" Tamara slowly lowered herself into a chair, looking at the time-yellowed photos. Two newborn girls, wrapped in identical diapers, with identical wrinkled faces. Really? How could anyone have noticed the switch? All the babies looked alike. "And what's this?" She reached out to a faded photograph of a young woman and her mother holding an infant 25 years ago. The woman smiled into the camera with a happy, exhausted smile. "This is our first day home." The mother crouched next to her, gingerly touching the photo with her fingertips. "Father took the picture. He was so proud. He showed it to everyone. This is how my daughter was born. And I was so tired, but happy. And you know what the most amazing thing is? I remember holding you. I remember the feeling, so small, warm, dear. And it was you, not the little girl I gave birth to. But for my heart there was no difference." Andre stood at the window, looking out into the courtyard, where the evening twilight was thickening. His shoulders were tense, as if he were carrying an invisible weight. "I should have told you," he said without turning around. "When I came across these documents in the archives, it was a medical malpractice case filed years after the incident. It was hushed up. No one was punished. It was the 90s. But the fact of the switch was established precisely, and I realized that I couldn't hide it. It wouldn't be fair." "Fair?" Tamara grinned bitterly. "Was it fair to decide for me? For all of us? Maybe both families were happy without knowing the truth. Maybe that woman is mine, my birth mother. She loves her non-native daughter too. How do you love me? Why did you have to ruin this life?" "Because the truth matters," Andrew said firmly, finally turning to face them. "Because it's not just about us. That girl, your biological family, has a right to know too. What if there are hereditary diseases out there? What if one of you needs a donor? It's not just about emotions. It's..." "Stop it." Tamara jumped up from her chair. "Stop talking like a lawyer. We're talking about our lives, our feelings. Do you realize what you've done? That everything is going to change now, everything and forever." She faltered as she saw her mother crying silently, stroking an old photograph. It was so unlike her usually reserved, strong mother that Tamara felt something inside her chatter. She knelt down in front of her mother's chair, took her hands in her own. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry, Mom. I didn't mean to scream. It's just that it's too much. I don't know how to move on with this. I don't know who I am now. It's you." Her mother stroked her head. just like when she was a little girl. The same girl who always stood up for the younger ones at school, who cried over every injured bird, who dreamed of becoming a librarian because she loved the smell of old books, who brewed the most delicious raspberry jam. Has that changed? Had all those years, all those memories become different? Dusk was thickening in the room. Andre turned on an old table lamp with a green shade, and its soft light created a cozy circle around them, as if protecting them from the coming darkness. This lamp had been here for as long as Tamara could remember. Her father had brought it back from a business trip to Leningrad, and her mother had cherished it like the apple of her eye. You know, Tamara said suddenly, still holding her mother's hands in hers, I've always wondered why you and I have such different personalities. You're determined, strong, never show weakness, and one. I've always been soft, sentimental. I can see why now. Nonsense. Her mother released one hand and wiped away her tears. Your grandmother, my mother, was exactly like that. Kind, compassionate, worried about everyone. Character is not only genes, it is everything that a person absorbs from childhood. Love, care. The example of parents. Andre came to the table and carefully gathered the scattered photos into a stack. Anything else? He said quietly. There's information about that family in the documents. They lived here, in a neighboring district. The last name is Kornilov's. I made inquiries. They're still there. Tamara shuddered. One thing with the abstract thought of another family existing somewhere and quite another. A specific surname. Real people living just a few dozen kilometers away. Maybe she'd even met them once, passed by them on the street without suspecting. Not now, her mother said firmly, noticing how pale Tamara had gone. All in good time. First we have to deal with it ourselves, accept it, and then think about the next step. And if they find out too? Tamara asked quietly. If they start looking, what then? Then we'll deal with problems as they come. Unexpectedly calmly, the mother replied, as we always have. Remember what father used to say. Eyes fear, hands do. He always knew how to be supportive in times of need. Tamara nodded, feeling tears coming to her throat. How many times had her father repeated those words when she was afraid of a test paper, or the first day at a new school, or a job interview? And every time, it helped. Simple, wise words spoken with love and faith in her. I miss him so much, she whispered. Sometimes I wake up and forget for a second that he's gone. I think I should call. Tell him something, and then I remember. He loved you more than life. Mother squeezed her hand, and it was true love. Tamara. Didn't matter whose blood flow in your veins, it was important that you were the light of his life, our life. Andre sat down on the edge of the chair, awkwardly adjusting his tie. There was so much helplessness in this simple gesture, so much desire to do something right, that Tamara suddenly felt a sharp pity for him. He too, after all, was in a terrible situation, had found the truth that could ruin their lives, and had to decide what to do with it. I'm sorry, he said, looking into her eyes. I know I hurt, but I couldn't have done it any other way. It's like a splinter. The longer you don't touch it, the deeper it goes in. I thought about it day and night, imagining how this truth could come out at the worst possible time, maybe when donors were needed or when doctors needed a family history. You've always been honest, Tamara replied quietly. Even too much so. Remember how, at our first meeting, you immediately told me you had flaws, listed them for half an hour. She smiled weakly, remembering that evening in the cafe, when the serious young lawyer had been careful to warn her of her flaws as if he were drawing up a contract. Her mother rose from her chair and began to fuss at the stove, as if trying to find comfort in the familiar activities. The dishes rattled, the kettle rumbled, and she smelled fresh brew. Tamara watched her movements, so familiar, calibrated over the years, and felt the icy lump inside slowly let go that had been restraining her since the terrible discovery. Remember when you taught me how to make tea, she said suddenly. First rinse the teapot with boiling water, then pour in the brew, 2 spoonfuls per cup and 1 for the teapot. Pour boiling water 1/3 full, cover with a towel and let infuse for exactly 7 minutes. And no bagged nonsense. My mother picked up on this and a smile flickered in her voice. Real tea must be brewed properly. That's what my grandmother taught me, and her mother. Traditions, they are not passed on in blood, but in love, in everyday little things. Andre stood up and went to the window. It was already dark behind the glass, and the black rectangle of the window reflected the lighted kitchen. A yellow circle from the lamp silhouettes of people, familiar surroundings, which suddenly became so fragile, so unreliable. Somewhere in the distance, dogs barked, and this ordinary sound of village life was strangely soothing. "You know," he said without turning around, "when I found those documents, I couldn't sleep for 3 days. Kept wondering if I had the right to be silent, whether the first had the right to speak. I consulted with colleagues, without mentioning names or circumstances. Many advised me to leave everything as it was. They said, why disturb the past when everyone was happy? And you didn't listen," Tamara said quietly. It didn't sound like a reproach, more like a statement of fact. She knew her husband too well, his integrity, his unwavering belief that the truth was always better than any lie. He couldn't. He turned toward them, and in the light of the lamp his face seemed gaunt, aged. He imagined that someday that truth would come out anyway, maybe at the worst possible moment, or that someone else would find those documents and use them with less care, or that that other family had a right to know, too. "Another family," echoed her mother, setting the cups on the table. Her hands, usually so confident, trembled slightly. "They love her too, don't they? That little girl I gave birth to. Probably as much as I love Tamara. She must have grown up happy, loved, too." Tamara felt a chill run down her spine. It was strange to think that a girl her age, her sister, by some evil joke of fate, lived somewhere quite close by. Maybe they even resembled each other, not outwardly, but by some elusive gestures, habits inherited from common biological parents. "They have a dacha near the district center," Andre said cautiously. "I've made inquiries. She works as a teacher at the local school, teaches literature." "Literature," Tamara laughed nervously. "And I'm a librarian. I wonder if it's genes or just coincidence. Maybe the love of books is hereditary. Or maybe it's a parental influence." Her mother set a cup of tea in front of her. "Remember how much we read when you were little? All those fairy tales, poems. Your father made special shelves for books in your room when you learned to read and started collecting your library." Tamara cupped her palms around the hot cup, feeling the warmth seep into her frozen fingers. Yes, the familiar aroma of thyme tea. Her mother always added a sprig of thyme, picked in the meadow behind the vegetable gardens, to the brew. It brought back a new wave of memories. "Do you remember when we used to go herb picking?" she asked. "You taught me to distinguish between plants, told me which herb helped what, and always said, the main medicine is not in the herbs, but in the love with which you collect and brew them." "Of course I remember." The mother sat down beside her and her hand rested on her daughter's shoulder, in such a familiar, native gesture. "I remember everything, daughter, every day, every minute. And you know what? I may not have carried you under my heart, but I have carried you in my heart all these years, and I will, no matter what happens." There was silence in the kitchen, but not as heavy and oppressive as before, but something thoughtful, almost peaceful. It was finally dark outside the window, and the glass reflected their small family gathered around the table, as it had been 1,000 times before. Only now it was different, as if they were learning anew to be a family, rediscovering each other. "Interesting," Tamara said suddenly, looking into her cup where a thyme leaf floated. "And she likes herbal tea too, and she collects books too, and she can't sleep in a thunderstorm either." She fell silent, catching her mother's worried look. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "No, that's right." Her mother covered her hand with her own. "It's natural, thinking about her, asking such questions. I stayed up all night myself, thinking about what she's grown up to be. Looks like me, like her father." "Is it happy?" Andrew set his cup on the table and pulled a folded sheet of paper from the inside pocket of his jacket. "I didn't want to say right away, but I found her social media page. There are pictures on there." Tamara flinched, and her mother turned so pale she looked like she was about to pass out. "Show me," she whispered with parched lips. Andre unfolded a sheet, a printout of a photograph. It showed a young woman, about Tamara's age, with dark hair and a surprisingly familiar smile. A smile that Tamara had seen so many times in old photos of her mother. "Elena," Andre said quietly. "Elena. Her name is Elena Kornilova. Married, raising a son. She teaches literature at school, leads the school theater club. Judging by the photos, a very active, creative person." The mother could not take her eyes off the photo. Her fingers lightly touched the paper, as if trying through this touch to convey all the unspent maternal love. "Beautiful," she whispered. "Just like me when I was young." And the smile, just the same. Tamara looked at the photograph with a strange feeling. She found nothing in this strange woman in common with herself, but for some reason she felt an inexplicable connection. Not a kinship, but something different, as if they were united by a common secret, a common destiny. You know, she said, after a long silence, maybe Andre is right. Maybe we really ought to get to know each other. Not now. Not right away, but someday. After all, it's strange to live next to each other and pretend nothing happened. Are you sure? Her mother raised a worried look at her. It might complicate things. She has her own life, her own family. Don't we have a right to know each other? Tamara herself was surprised at the firmness in her voice. Wouldn't she want to know about her roots, about her biological family, about you? Mom? Andre watched them in silence, and there was relief in his eyes. It was as if he had been waiting all this time for just such a solution, but had been afraid to offer it. I think, he began cautiously, that we can do it gradually. First, perhaps, write a letter, explain the situation, give time to think things over. Don't rush things. The mother got up and went to the window. Her face was reflected in the darkness, drowsy, aged for that evening, but at the same time as if brightened, as if the decision had lifted a heavy weight from her shoulders. 25 years, she muttered. For a quarter of a century I've lived with the idea that somewhere there was my blood, who I hadn't even had time to get a good look at, and now I see her smile, my smile on someone else's face and yet so dear at the same time. Tamara stood up and hugged her mother from behind, resting her cheek against her shoulder. Her mother smelled of freshly baked bread and herbs. Such a native, familiar smell from her childhood. We'll make it, she whispered. We'll all make it together. It just takes time. Outside the window, a lantern on a pole flickered and lit up, illuminating a piece of the yard. An old apple tree, flowers wet with evening dew in the front garden, a fence with peeling paint. Such a familiar, native world that seemed to have collapsed a few hours ago, but now was gradually being reassembled. Different, but maybe even more real, more honest. The clock on the wall struck 10. Tamara realized with surprise that only a few hours had passed since she had seen Andre's car at the gate. It seemed like a lifetime had passed since then, that old life in which everything was simple and clear. It's getting late, her mother said, gathering cups from the table. Stay the night. Where are you going to go now for the night? Looking. You could hear the pearly concealed anxiety in her voice, as if she was afraid that if Tamara left now, something would irrevocably change, something important would go untold. Andre looked at his wife, waiting for her decision. Tamara nodded. She didn't want to leave herself, not now, when there was so much to think about, to realize, to accept. And just to be near her mother, to feel her presence, her love, which suddenly seemed even more precious, even more real. I'll make the bed for you in the big room, her mother fussed, pulling clean linens out of an old closet. The familiar smell of the lavender she always put between the sheets pinched her heart. How many times as a child had Tamara fallen asleep breathing in that scent, feeling protected and loved? Let me help. Tamara took the stack of laundry from her mother. Their hands touched for a moment, and she noticed her mother's fingers trembling. Mom, she said quietly, it's going to be okay. I know it's going to be hard, but we'll get through it. Her mother nodded, brushing away an unsolicited tear. You know what I'm thinking, don't you? She said, spreading the sheet on the wide bed. About how amazingly life works. My father and I couldn't have children for almost 10 years. We went to doctors, we prayed, and then a miracle happened. I got pregnant. And now I think maybe it was a sign. Maybe we were meant to be parents for you. Tamara sat on the edge of the bed. And that woman, Elena's mother, you never tried to find her. Back then. 25 years ago. No. The mother shook her head. We didn't even realize the switch. You know, newborns, they all look so much alike. And then you were just our daughter. The only one. Our favorite. How could you look for someone else? I found her name in the papers, he said quietly. Maria Kornilova. She worked as a teacher, just like her daughter is now. Perhaps it's no coincidence, such continuity. How strange. Tamara said thoughtfully. It turns out that each of us followed in the footsteps of our biological parents anyway. I, your daughter Mommy, inherited your love of books and quiet study. And Elena, the daughter of a teacher, chose that profession, too. Genes are a strange thing, Andre agreed. But you know what's even more amazing? The way love can be stronger than blood. The way two people who aren't biologically related can become truly kin. Her mother finished making the bed and sat down next to Tamara. "When you were little," she began, "you often asked me why I loved you so much, remember? And I'd say because you're my little girl. And you know what? It was the truth. It's just that love doesn't need explanations. It's either there or it's not." Outside the window, a distant rumble of thunder could be heard. A thunderstorm was approaching, rare for October, but so characteristic of these places, where cold air from the north meets the warm southern wind. Tamara involuntarily shivered. She still didn't like thunderstorms. "Maybe it's a sign." Her mother smiled, noticing her reaction. "Remember when you and I used to wait out a thunderstorm? I'd hold you in my arms, sing you a lullaby, and you'd fall asleep despite the thunder and lightning." "Sing it now," Tamara asked suddenly. "The one about the gray cat." And her mother sang, quietly, in a slightly trembling voice, but with such love, such tenderness, that Tamara's breath caught. Andrew stood in the doorway, hesitant to break the moment, tears glistening in his eyes. "Bayu-bayu-bayu-bayu. Don't lie down on the edge." Familiar words from childhood enveloped him, soothed him, as if to say that no matter what happens, no matter how life changes, love remains love, and family remains family, even if it is not created by the ties of blood, but by the ties of love and care. The storm was approaching, but the old village house was warm and cozy, smelling of fresh linen and mother's lavender. The floorboards crackled, the clock on the wall ticked. Life went on, different, changed, but maybe even more real, more profound. And somewhere out there, a few dozen kilometers away, lived another woman who was to become part of this story. A story about becoming family not by blood, but by love. Thank you for listening to the story to the end. Write your opinion in the comments, subscribe to the Mystery Words channel, and share this video with others. It gives us inspiration to create new interesting stories every day. Don't miss the new video that you will see on your home screen right now. All the best and be happy.